mapping out the country's next 5 years. The top legislature approved the country's economic and social development blueprint for the 2016 to 2020 period, setting China's average economic growth rate target at or about 6.5%. And lawmakers' suggestions were well received by the government.
I feel that the government is getting more practical and efficient. My proposal is on vocational education. I get feedback from the government on my proposal.
The government attaches great importance to people's livelihoods every year. And this year we can tell from the new 5-year plan that the government is very determined.
Lawmakers also passed the charity law, which is fundamental and comprehensive in its structure. It provides an important legal basis to carry forward socialist core values and Chinese traditional virtues, as well as promoting the healthy development of philanthropy in China.
We need to study and promote the law, be well prepared prior to the enforcement of the law, and take its implementation as an opportunity to increase the development of a Chinese charity and charity law construction to a new level.
Improving people's livelihoods is also high on the government's reform agenda. Measures listed in the latest 5-year plan range from eradicating poverty and promoting health to improving education and adding more jobs.
My main focus on the basic public services, particularly in the rural area, such as the drink water supply and elementary education conditions improving, and the health care conditions.
China is aiming to double both the size of its economy and, more importantly, its per capita income by 2020 from 2010 levels. Another ambitious goal is to lift all of its people out of poverty and establish a minimum annual income of 2,300 yuan, approximately $1 a day, for its rural residents. The 13th 5-year plan places more emphasis on the prosperity of the country's nearly 1.4 billion people. Lawmakers had hoped the growth can be translated into the benefits for the masses rather than the fortunes for a few. Hona, CCTV, Beijing.
Let's now bring you the latest from Beijing, and we're joined live from there by CCTV's Han Peng. What have been the key highlights from China's 2 key political meetings?
Well, Panina, there are 2 key figures coming out of this year's political season. One is China's GDP growth, and the second is its military spending. This morning, the National People's Congress has approved Premier Li Keqiang's government work report, in which he set a target of China's GDP growth in 2016 at 6.5 to 7%, although some say that China should gradually shift its focus from quantity to quality of its economic growth. Setting the annual growth rate is still somehow necessary for China, at least the next 5 years, because the government has to fulfill, as what Hona said just now, has to fulfill its promise to double its GDP growth of 2010 by 2020. And if you do the math, 6.5% average annual growth rate is actually really the bottom of the bottom line of for China to realize that ambitious promise. And the second figure is China's military budget. The NPC has approved the budget plan to increase China's defense spending in 2016 by 7.6% to nearly 1 trillion RMB, or around 150 billion US dollars. That makes China the second largest defense spender in the world, following the United States. But at the same time, it's also worth noticing that the increase is the smallest in the country's defense spending over the past 6 years. Panila?
So, Han Peng, going forward, what should we expect in terms of implementation of the agreed points?
Well, Premier Li Keqiang has laid out both difficulties and some ambitious goals in China's economy. He says that one of the biggest issues China has to deal with in 2016 is excessive industrial capacity. He pledged that while the government is determined to reduce industrial capacity, the Chinese people will not suffer major wave of unemployment like what happened in China in late 1990s. He says that over the past 2 years, China has reduced hundreds of billions of tons of steel production, which provided jobs to millions of workers in China. But all of them have now been relocated well into other industries. He added that the central government has prepared 100 billion RMB, or around $15 billion to deal with potential rise of unemployment caused by restructuring, and that the funding will be increased if necessary. Besides difficulties, there are also some ambitious goals the leadership has promised to achieve in the next 5 years. By 2020, China will not just double its GDP growth of 2010, but will also achieve a complete elimination of poverty across the country, establish internet access for everyone, build up a well-off society in all respects, and raise Chinese people's life expectancy by 1 year. Back to you, Panina.
All right, and paying live for us there in Beijing. Thank you for joining us. The National People's Congress has wrapped up its annual session after passing 9 documents, including the draft resolution on the government work report and the 13th five-year plan for economic and social development. And to discuss the CPPCC's impact here in Africa, we're joined by Bridget Taylor, live in Johannesburg, South Africa. Bridget is the CEO of K-On Capital and a specialist on China-Africa economies. Thanks for joining us, Bridget. So what is the significance of the annual political sessions in China to Africa?
Well, it really is significant from the perspective that we rely heavily on exports and imports from China with regards to our local trade. That is not just in the South African economy, that's across the economy within Africa, as well as the fact that we've been talking recently about the oil production, etc., and the types of trade viability that we still see and hope to still see within the Chinese corridor.
And what lessons can African countries take from the Chinese political process?
They can benefit, and I think that one of the key factors that China did mention, and that is key in Africa, is getting people that are below the poverty line to become those sustainable or moderate earners that then start to add value to the fiscus. So from that perspective, upskilling, creating work opportunities, creating job opportunities for those that are less fortunate, so that they start to contribute something back. There's consumer spending that's on the back of that, as well as the possibility of them becoming tax contributors, which obviously adds to the treasury and the fiscal function, which then adds impetus to the budget within the various economies. In South Africa ourselves, we also looking at how to get those that are at that poverty level up to sustainable levels so that we can start to integrate them more effectively into the economy.
And what are some of the immediate benefits to Africa after the conclusion of China's political sessions this year?
Well, I think that the Chinese growth trajectory still remains intact, and that was something that the market was very, very evidently watching, just from the perspective that the discussions last year talking about the new normal in China looks at that growth expectation around the 7%. That continues to be in play, which is positive for the African economy, and because of the fact that we're such a trade partner of China, as well as the fact that they are going to be including certain monetary policy leniencies, should I say, in the market, which hopefully will start to create more consumer spending and more consumption of Africa-type products.
All right, Bridget Taylor, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for joining us there from Johannesburg.